Planet TV, I'm Richard D. Hall. We've mentioned NASA on the show many times before, and I have even had email contact with Robert Manning, an engineer who is ostensibly the chief engineer on the Mars Curiosity program. He agreed to answer technical questions about the mission, but then ran away from my questions when it seemed he could not answer them, affirming the phrase that NASA stands for never a straight answer. If you don't believe what I have just said, then please watch this lecture from the link on the screen, which includes evidence that Curiosity may not be situated on Mars and could be in the Canadian Arctic. I am joined today by somebody who has also had communication with NASA, albeit in a slightly more surreptitious method. I'd like to welcome onto Rich Planet Gary McKinnon. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
All right, then. I think a large number of my viewers will know who you are already and have the outline of your story, which we will go through the basic points of today.
Yep.
And it started with an interest in UFOs. Can you tell us first, when did your interest in UFOs start?
UFOs specifically, well, I was always into stars. Apparently, even when I was 3 years old, I was always asking about the stars and stuff. So I was always looking at the sky from a young age.
Your interest in UFOs goes back a long way, and I've not heard this on mainstream TV before, right back to the age of when you were 12.
Yep.
So tell us about that.
My stepfather, because my parents split up when I was 6 and we moved out from Glasgow to London, my stepfather was an avid science fiction fan, so I suppose that's what really got me into all that sort of stuff. And yeah, science fiction, you get interested in aliens and UFOs, and the possibility of life in outer space and contact with other beings is probably one of the most exciting things we can imagine, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I then joined BUFORA, the British UFO Research Association, when I was about 12. It was a subscription-based thing, and you got a monthly newsletter, if I remember rightly. It was a long time ago now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
All right, so how did you find out about the Disclosure Project?
Well, obviously, having an interest in UFOs, when the internet came to Britain in the mid-90s, an incredible resource for UFO information. And so after a while, you do stumble across the... Well, actually, I was already interested in just finding out stuff. But then, was it 2000 or 2001?
2001 was the conference.
That's what really got me going, that conference.
Right.
To me, that was mind-blowing. All these high-level witnesses, you know.
Right, because it wasn't widely publicised.
No.
So how did you know about it when it came about?
I think someone else told me. And they told me before the event took place. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm right in remembering at the time, they had some kind of broadcast failure as well.
Right.
So it didn't reach the sort of multicast internet audience that they hoped it would at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was your inspiration to try and find out more, the Disclosure Project, or one of the pieces of inspiration. So I gather it was after the Disclosure Project conference that you got sort of caught red-handed with your computer-related activities.
Yeah.
Were you involved in computer-related activities before the Disclosure Project, or was that the...
That was the instigator to having a look,
right.
if I can call it that.
All right, so can you just tell us how you went about trying to find out information that you thought was being kept secret?
Yep. One of the Disclosure Project witnesses is Donna Hare, and she was working at Johnson Space Center at NASA. She had secret clearance. She was a photographic sort of mission launch specialist. Mm-hmm. And she said that one day when she was working in Building 8, so she actually mentioned the building of Johnson Space Center, JSC, there was a colleague who was in another room, but they all had secret clearance, but they were on different projects. Mm-hmm. And she was in this chap's lab or room, whatever it is, and he said to her, "Come and take a look at this, you know, what do you think this might be?" And he showed her a picture of a large white disc, presumably a satellite photograph, above the Earth, but not very high above the Earth because there was a shadow on the trees, which Donna Hare didn't spot at first. And being a photographic expert, she said, "Well, is that a blob in the emulsion?" That's her first professional thought. And the guy said, "Blobs in the emulsion don't cast circular shadows." And she basically said that he told her his entire lab was to do with airbrushing out UFOs from high-res satellite imagery from NASA because they're so preponderant around the planet.
Right, and did you give the name of the building that you was working in?
Building 8.
Building 8. So, just tell us then technically how you went about trying to access information like that.
Yeah. Well, I was already on Johnson Space Centre, you know, in terms of my illegal presence there, because they ran Windows. They were running something called NetBIOS over the internet. NetBIOS is an Office protocol, basically, for Windows. It's very insecure. There's no way you should be running that open to the internet, so it's very easy to get in. And
so I just interrupt you there, Gary. So you would need the IP address that's running the NetBIOS initially to try and request data from it, yeah?
yeah,
So how did you find the IP address of Building 8 or whatever system you were trying to access?
Yeah. Well, you can.
That's publicly available, is it?
Oh yeah, there's online services where you can type in, you know, Johnson Space Centre, or the network name, which I think was jsc-nasa.gov, and they give you the whole IP block that they own.
Right.
And somewhat stupidly, NASA, just like the military and everyone else, wasn't using non-routable internet addresses, like which are saved for offices because they're private. You know what I mean.
So this is what you call an internet-facing IP address on a desktop computer. Is that?
Yeah, the desktop computers, the main servers.
So there was no firewall at all. It's as if so you could ping the computers
Yeah.
in NASA on a desk from your own router.
Yeah, some of them wouldn't ping, but I'd still probe them just in case they didn't reply to pings, but they were still live machines.
Right. So you gained access to a whole raft of computer systems within.
Wow.
Can I ask you, was it just NASA? Or
Oh no, they're all like this. I used that one single method to gain entry to the places I got into.
right, and are you allowed to say which other places you got into, or
Well, I'll say it was the Army, the Navy, and NASA, and the Pentagon.
Right.
Yeah.
right? And were they all on separate banks of IP addresses? Each of those that you've just
Oh
mentioned.
yeah, completely separate blocks.
Right.
Yeah.
So you knew whether you were trying to access NASA or Pentagon or Army, Navy. They're all in completely different IP ranges.
Yeah, but
Right.
once you're in there, it can get a bit confusing because once you start exploring, there's attached networks, other networks, private networks, and in the end, you're not really sure where you are after a while. But
Right. All right. So it was quite comprehensive, the sort of amount of access that you had. And I've heard you say that there were other people there who also doing what you were doing. And would you say that you were one of the more prolific people doing that? Did you get an impression, or would you not be able to say?
I can't say because I don't know what they were doing, but I did a simple command because when you're on there, at first I was using the command line interface, so it's just a black box. And but you do a command on Windows called netstat, and you can see all the other connections to the same machine. And then you can look up those IP addresses and think, well, God, they're from China, they're from Denmark, they're from Turkey. It's like the whole world was in these machines. And I knew that was wrong because there's no way people from all over the world should be on NASA machines. So they must have all been unwelcome guests like I was.
Right. So what period of time from when you first accessed the first system to when you got arrested, what's the duration we're talking?
Oh, like 18 months, 2 years.
Right. All right. So did you have any feeling at the time that you might get collared for this at all?
No, because I thought initially when the security's so lax anyway, I thought, well, if it's that easy to get in, then they probably aren't monitoring properly.
Right.
So,
Right. All right. So let's talk about what you saw before we go on to then what happened with the arrest and everything.
yeah.
How long was it before you saw anything of any sort of significance?
Oh, a long time.
Right.
Months and months.
So did you not get bored with it, or was it always keeping your fascination with what kept you going back if you didn't get anything for months and months?
Oh, the promise of possibly finding something.
Right.
And the fact it was so easy, and I thought at some point this is going to close the store and they'll stop running NetBIOS over the internet.
Right.
And you won't be able to find blank passwords so easily.
Right. And every time you were in communicating with a particular online IP address, would you always know which building you were accessing computers from?
No, not at all. Not the physical building.
Right.
No.
Right. All right. So just tell us when you got your first hit, if you like, as regards actually seeing something interesting.
The first thing was documentation. I used a program called Land Search. I think that once you had control over the domain, because you'd get control of domain controllers, so you own the whole network, basically. And Land Search could actually search all the files and folders on every machine. And obviously it's hard because things aren't going to be called secret UFO data.pdf, are they? So, but I'd scan and look for documents, etc., and I found an Excel spreadsheet that was actually called, or at least in the heading of the column, it said non-terrestrial officers. And I was like, my bloody God, that's just
non-terrestrial officers.
Non-terrestrial officers with ranks and names, and then a separate sheet with tabs for material transfer between ships. And these were, I mean, I don't remember the names now. It's a long time ago. A lot of people give me a hard time for not remembering the names and stuff, but it was a long time ago.
Right.
But non-terrestrial officers thought, well, it must be, let's try and cut out all the possible conventional explanations first. I searched for that term. It was nowhere. It was nowhere at all. Now, if you search for the term, you only find links to me and stuff that I've said.
Right, I see. So
it wasn't a standard thing in the military at all.
Right.
So I took that to be, they must have a secret space-based...
So the non-terrestrial officers, what, it couldn't be astronauts?
It could be. I mean, that's the thing. It's up to you how you interpret that, isn't it?
Right.
But these ships were called USS whatever and USS whatever.
So they've started with USS?
Yeah, so that implies Navy. And I think the Navy do a lot of space stuff,
right.
The US Navy.
And how many officers' names would you estimate were listed, and how many ships were listed?
Probably, oh God. I think there was probably one screen full of officers' names. So what's that, 25 rows on an Excel spreadsheet? And these were low-resolution days as well. So you're talking about 800 by 600 screens, not very big. But the ships was probably, I don't know, a third of the spreadsheet.
So estimate how many different ship names you saw?
Oh God, maybe 8, 10.
8 or 10.
Yeah.
And am I right in thinking that you then tried to search for those specific names?
Oh yeah.
Right, and
didn't find a thing.
Right,
Yeah.
so you think that they could be classified...
Not the names of the people, the names of the ships.
Yeah, but they could be classified secret or top secret names of some sort of craft or ship.
Yeah, obviously not public.
Right.
So.
All right, Gary, well, we'll continue this after the break. Welcome back. I'm talking to Gary McKinnon about when he accessed NASA computer systems and found some very interesting information on there. I've given lectures, Gary, about the TR-3B, and in those lectures, this is an alleged secret aircraft, and in those lectures I've sort of put forward the case that it's not really NASA that's possibly designed that technology, that it's maybe some secret part of the Air Force and the NSA that is controlling the information. This comes from Edgar Fouché, whistleblower.
Right.
And that NASA are, or at least publicly, predominantly put on display rockets. I don't think there's anything more advanced propulsion-wise than a rocket. So, what are your feelings on that? What do you the fact that you've been into a NASA establishment systems and you're finding non-terrestrial officers? So I'm putting the question: don't you think there would be somewhere else like the NSA?
Well, the non-terrestrial officers, I think, was on a Navy system.
Right.
Did I say that earlier? I think I did.
Oh, that wasn't in NASA.
No, that was on a Navy system.
Right, I see.
If I remember rightly, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So the non-terrestrial officers spreadsheet, that wasn't in a NASA building, you don't think?
No.
All right. That was in a Navy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And in the actual ships as well. You mentioned there was names of ships. That was Navy as well.
Yeah.
So
the
that
spreadsheet.
Right. So that wasn't in a NASA folder in Building 8.
No.
Right.
No.
I see. All right. So that could explain the question that I've just asked there. So just to stay on this sidetrack, what are your feelings on the Apollo missions? Do you buy into we never went to the moon, or do you have a strong position, or are you open-minded? What's your...
I think when you think about things like the Van Allen belts and the radiation, and the film on the cameras, the battery on the module, there's a lot of solid scientific reasons why it was impossible with the technology back then.
Right. All right. Well,
even the computer power back then makes me slightly suspect.
Right. All right. Well, you've answered that question. So you mentioned Donna Hare before, whose colleague was involved in airbrushing UFOs out of NASA images, and this allegedly took place in Building 8 at the Johnson Space Centre.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you accessed computer systems there. Tell me what you found.
Because Donna Hare had said it was Building 8, when you're in the command line interface and you type in netstat, Windows has a function where when you list all the machines on the network, there's a comment field, and NASA had used the comment field for standard computer audit information that said this isn't building blah, that this is the serial number, etc., etc. So finding Building 8 was surprisingly easy, And so then I scanned that subnet, so I think it was only 255 machines on the subnet for Building 8. And there they were, all these machines with blank administrator passwords. It was as if when they built the network, they'd used an image and blatted out the image to every machine, because every single machine had a blank administrator password. An administrator gives you full control, so it was ridiculous. In Building 8 at Johnson Space Centre, I found out there were folders, called raw and filtered, or processed and unprocessed. And these files were like 200 odd megabytes, 250 megabytes. They were in a proprietary NASA format. And this is in the days of 56K dial-up, so you couldn't download them in like 5 minutes. And I wanted to get on there, find out what I could, and get out quickly. And so I had remote control of the desktop using a program called Remotely Anywhere. And so if you double-clicked on an image, their proprietary software came up, and the image was there. But it wasn't there like that because it's a slow connection. I turned it down to, I think, 2-bit or 4-bit color. I can't remember if it was monochrome or just 4-bit color. And it started, judging down the screen. I think Remotely Anywhere was a Java app at the time. And I only got to see about half or 2/3 of it or something. But it was a hemisphere of a planet, which I assume was Earth, because it was blue and it was cloudy. And but it was a classic cigar shape, with no seams, no rivets, no sort of workmanship on the outside. But it did have one sort of human-looking thing, which was the sort of geodesic domes that you see at Menwith Hell. Above and below, to the left and the right, and one, on its nose, and I assume, one on this side, and I assume one on the other side as well. So, I mean, some people say that could have been man-made because of that geodesic dome feature. But the fact of it all flowed in. There was no, there's the tube, and there's a socket for the dome. It was all a flowing, But that's when I saw someone else, the mouse moved, right-clicked on the LAN icon, disconnect, and boom, I was gone.
When you saw that particular image, did that then lead to your arrest?
Yeah, because when they disconnected me, they obviously got my IP address, because I was doing a direct connection, foolishly, at that time, because I was getting lazy or cavalier. And it was NASA that contacted BT about the IP address. Then you get the client's address through the police, UK police. So that's what got me caught.
Right. So that then started. Well, how many years was the legal battle going on?
Nearly 11 years, from March 2002 till October 2012.
So the first you found out about it was you got a knock at the door.
Yeah.
So just explain what happened on that day.
Crikey. I'd stopped doing the hacking, if you can call it that, blank password phishing. And I think I'd been playing this PC game called Galactic Civilizations all night till about 3 o'clock. So I'd only been asleep for a few hours. And next thing I know, there's someone saying, Gary McKinnon, and prodding me. And I woke up to find a detective, whatever he was, from the National High-Tech Crime Unit, saying you're under arrest for, well, I assume he said hacking into NASA. I can't really remember now. But
right. And so, did they take you away from your home then?
No, the first thing they did was a massive search. They searched my girlfriend, they searched me, they searched the house, they took away the computers, not just the hard drives, they took away all the computers. I was fixing computers for people as well, they took away all of those. Yeah.
Right. So did they give you them back?
Oh yeah, after a long time. I got back my friends' machines and clients' machines that I was fixing, I got them back within a few months. But I only got my... Oh no, they never gave me back my hard drives because they had evidence on them.
Right. So you never got them back?
No, because I didn't get time to get a copy of the image, but I got a copy of the non-terrestrial officer spreadsheet, which was on my hard drive, which was encrypted. But I stupidly told them the password. I just fessed up to everything when I got caught. Because they said, oh, you'll only get 6 months, or probably not even that, you'll get community service, you'll be fine.
So that spreadsheet that we discussed earlier was on the hard drive that was confiscated from you, and you've never seen it again?
No, I'm still trying to get it back.
Right, so, which is why you can't remember the names, because you thought you had it stored on your hard drive, right? All right, so as you said, initially they said to you, oh, you'll get some community service or something like this. So why did that then turn into an extradition request and a threat for 60 or 70 years in prison? How did that progress from up the chain? Well,
what happened, the NHTCU officers went to Washington, and when they came back from Washington, they'd obviously been extremely impressed by talking to the top brass over there, who'd obviously said, it's a very serious case, he's a very dangerous man. Just like
this is the Americans said this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm assuming, because the officers came back with a completely different attitude. No longer was it 6 months of community service, now it was a very serious thing.
Right, so they arrested you, they were quite okay with you, confiscated your stuff, then they went out to America to speak to whoever, and then they've come back with a completely different attitude.
Yeah, and gave me a second interview.
Right.
And because I didn't have a lawyer present at my first interview, and I just admitted, because I knew it was all on the hard drive, where it'd been, because I'd kept files and stuff, so there was no point saying, no, I didn't do it. So I assumed I should have had a lawyer at first, and it might not have gone on for so long, who knows. But I had a lawyer at the second interview, and they were trying to get me on conspiracy, saying, oh, we saw some of your ICQ chat logs, and we think you may have been working with other people, which I wasn't. And I said, well, no. But I had chatted to people about what I was doing, but I didn't involve anyone else at all.
Right.
And it was then they started saying, well, it's very serious, it could be a long jail term, the Americans, really want you bad. There's a lot of pressure from Washington on Downing Street or whatever.
And were they trying to twist it and say that you'd actually caused damage, even though you were just maintaining a silent presence?
Well, this is the thing, there was, it wasn't until I actually saw the American charge sheet where they listed, all the supposed damage. So I don't think the NHTCU mentioned damage to me at first, but they kept on calling it attacks and targets, and I said, can you please not use that language, because it wasn't an attack. I was in there and I was looking around, but I wasn't attacking, I wasn't vandalising,
But in order to get the extradition, do they not have to prove that you've done damage? Can they extradite you just based on the fact that you're looking at stuff?
This is the thing, they don't need any proof. They just need the accusation, and they need to get your name and address right, and they can take you over there.
Right.
As has happened to countless people since me.
Right.
So.
Right. All right. The Americans have come down quite heavy-handed, saying they want you extradited, and the British authorities are going along with that initially. Is that right?
Well, no, because the initial arrest was March 2002, and the full ratified extradition request didn't come through till 2005, because our laws. We didn't have this special UK-US extradition treaty in place. We were still going off the 1989 extradition treaty, which required good evidence for the accused offence. So we think they tactically waited. We think they may even have made this law, or certainly included my case in the formation of the law, because even some of the wording of the new treaty, and the spelling was American in this UK-US treaty. It was American spelling, ridiculous. So they waited until 2005, I think it was, to present it fully. And I'd got my first job in a few years, because I couldn't work in IT anymore, obviously, because everyone thought, oh, hands off for a while. And I got my forklift licence, was working in a warehouse, and I got a phone call from my lawyer at work, and she said they want to extradite you, you're going to stand trial in America. And that just flabbergasted me, absolutely flabbergasted me. I had journalists coming around to the warehouse where I was working, my landlord threw me out of my flat. And already the first time I'd have been arrested, I lost a lot. I lost my long-term girlfriend and the place I was living in, and here it was happening all again.
All right, and Gary, we'll continue this very fascinating discussion after this break. Welcome back. I'm talking to Gary McKinnon about the fact that he accessed NASA computers and other defence establishment computers in America and witnessed some very interesting information. When did the mainstream media get hold of it for the very first time?
2002, the initial arrest.
Right, so that was in the mainstream media?
Yeah, there was a peak then.
Right, and then another peak in 2005.
Yeah.
So it seems grossly unfair that they can pass a new agreement or treaty and apply it to something
retrospectively, and that was in the wording of the treaty. This is retrospective as well.
Right, but they still were attempting to do that. Now, here's another devil's advocate question then, Gary. wouldn't you think that they would try and keep it low key? So, in other words, say to the British intelligence equivalent, look, we want this kept out of the media, and I'm quite convinced that on issues like this, if they wanted it kept out of the media, they probably could keep it out of the media with D-notices if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So I asked the question, do you think it was deliberately made into a big mainstream media issue at the request of the Americans?
Well, in America, there was no media. They were definitely keeping it quiet over there, or they just hadn't heard of it.
Right.
But there was almost zero coverage in America.
Because here's another possibility, and again, I'm just exploring it as a possibility that they've looked at what you've seen, they've thought, okay, it's not massively damaging, so let's let it out into the media as a, not a diversion, but as a, look over here, we've got other stuff over there. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah, well, no, you're right, because also you have to remember at that time, that was, you know, long before Anonymous and all that. That was the growth of hacking, big time, starting in the UK anyway. And it was the first time there was that sort of global awareness that this could be a problem. You know, people like this could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there may have been the idea that, well, if we get this one guy and do a great big show trial and make sure everyone knows about it, that'll scare off every other possible person in the future. So
yeah, it allows them to be more draconian with their legislation, maybe, by trumpeting one case and making an example of it, rather than making an example of you because you found something sensitive.
Yeah. Well, there was one guy, a journalist I don't trust very much because he never paid me for my interview in the end. I was on the dole, he said, oh, I'll give you 200 quid, you tell me all about your story. I won't mention his name because it could be libel. But he said that he'd gone over there and interviewed the top brass, and they said that the main thing was embarrassment. But I don't actually believe that. I don't trust that journalist. But one journalist did say that.
Right. And other than that, have you got had any other clues as to the reason? That's the only thing you've had?
Yeah,
as to the real why they're upset over it.
Yeah, I mean, very strangely, the UFOs weren't really mentioned very much in the media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did end up being called the UFO hacker, which is good because the Americans were trying to get me called the 9/11 hacker, because it was, you know, they say before, during, and shortly after 9/11, he was hacking into our security, you know, as if I don't know, as if not that I had something to do with it, but as just that emotional attachment. They use 9/11, even to this day, they use 9/11 to bring emotions out. And,
Now, you've done quite a lot of media interviews, Gary. One of them was the Richard and Judy show. You were quite petrified to go on that show, I believe.
I was terrified because Richard and Judy were a big thing back then, you know. And I really don't like being on camera. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm nervous even now after all these years. But I had to do it to raise awareness of the extradition treaty, its unfairness, and the fact that I didn't do any damage, and there's no way it should be such a huge thing.
Right. No, one thing I picked up on that, because I watched it on YouTube the other day, is Richard Madeley said that your best friend, John Ronson, he made some reference to John Ronson.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, do you know John Ronson well?
No, not at all. He did the first interview, I think, in The Guardian.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was the first interview. And John Ronson's style is a bit humorous. You know, he doesn't really take his subjects very seriously.
He's condescending.
Okay, yeah.
In my opinion.
No, he is. And he did actually put words into my mouth and then wrote them. You know, when he was talking about the damage, I said, well, I know I didn't do any damage. He said, yeah, but maybe you pressed the wrong button. So I said, well, maybe, but I don't think so. But in the interview, he said, oh, yeah, and Gary said maybe he pressed the wrong button. So that angered me. So, no, we certainly weren't best friends.
Right. But, so how many times did you meet him?
Oh, once.
Right. So on Richard and Judy, I think, I'll need to check this, but I think they described him as your best friend or a close friend.
That does ring a bell.
Even your staunchest defender, a guy called Mr. Ronson, who writes for The Guardian, John Ronson. I mean, he says that there's no way are you a threat to the American system or the American defence system, but you're just a computer nerd who went too far. That's what he says, and he's your best friend. Is that fair?
Right, you say that.
So that's really strange why they would say that, because if I was to say what I think of John Ronson now, it wouldn't get broadcast.
Right.
He's... Well,
you can't say it.
I can't say it. Well, thanks for clearing that up, Gary, that you were interviewed by John Ronson.
Yeah.
So that clears that up for me. So you've obviously had a lot of interaction between various officials at the Home Office and other organisations. Just tell me a bit about what you learned about the Home Office, Gary.
What I learned about the Home Office was that I think the older crew in the Home Office have strong links with Washington, and they're very eager to please. But I think the younger up-and-coming members are more, Britain is a sovereign nation and we control what we do. Well, I think they like it to be that way, some of them, not all of them. But I also found or heard that, and this is from a very reliable source, that officials from Washington are walking around the Home Office telling people what to do.
Right.
Which is just not on at all.
It doesn't surprise me, that. And the BBC, you've also got opinions on the BBC?
Yeah, I think they were quite unfriendly to me at first. Not because I did a few interviews with the BBC, and I don't think the individual producers, although I did have one fairly unfriendly interview, I can't remember her name now, but I think maybe the executive producers have an agenda to push and didn't like me at first, until they realised the tide was turning when the Daily Mail campaign started taking off. And then thought, well, this looks like this guy might win in the end, so now we'll start being more friendly. But I think if they had their way at first, I think they would have.
So what do you think it was that changed then, that went from them absolutely wanting you extradited to then dropping the extradition request? What was the reason for that?
Well, why did Theresa May? Because the request wasn't dropped. Theresa May just refused it.
All right, she refused it. Okay, but my opinion of Theresa May is she's not making her own independent decisions. I would guess that Washington have told her to do that. That would be my hunch.
Well,
that it's not been an independent to America.
I heard again from reliable sources that at one point there was a plane waiting for me, one of those special planes that go to Turkey and Jordan now and then.
All right.
And that Theresa May was going to give my extradition the go-ahead. But, because I think they do make individual decisions to a certain extent,
right.
But obviously they all have advisors. But I think the Home Secretary is a very, very special position, unless you're Alan Johnson, who was rubbish at his job, and he admitted that himself. He said, I'm just a hack politician. But I think in the end, it did seem to be the medical evidence.
Right.
That did swing her mind. She realised that it was a terrifying position for me. And I'd bought potassium chloride to kill myself rather than go on that plane and go over there.
Right. So when you say the medical evidence, you were diagnosed with, is it Asperger's?
Yeah, by the 5 top people in the land. Yeah.
Right. It's not something I really know much about. I mean, I don't know whether you want to talk about that aspect of it, Gary. Do you want to mention anything about that?
Yeah, well, it's apparently I wasn't on the high end of the spectrum. I've met some people with autism that really need looking after, and they can't function on their own, So they called mine high-functioning Asperger's or high-functioning autism.
Yeah. Gary did get the wrong train when he came here.
I did. I'm not bad in I'm not good in the 3D world, but
just in the virtual world.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. But it's that they said the signature of my Asperger's is my extreme interest in justice and fairness and truth.
Right.
And apparently a lot of us have that in common, and we will work for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, to find the truth.
Maybe I should get myself checked out.
Right.
Or maybe not.
Yeah.
To me, the most interesting part is the list of non-terrestrial officers and possible undisclosed ships. Were any mainstream journalists interested in that?
No, I mean, they all, after the first interview, they read that and they see, okay, we can ask him about this and that, but they don't go into it like you do. They don't drill down on the detail.
Right.
They just say, so you were looking for UFOs and you found this, and then they gloss over it.
Right.
There's no deep interest, really.
Right.
And I apologise to any interviewers that did ask me, because it's so long ago now, I can't remember.
Okay. Right. Thank you then, Gary. We're going to go for another break and we'll continue after this. Welcome back. I'm talking to Gary McKinnon. Now, in some of your media interviews, Gary, I've seen you talk about free energy, and I'm also very interested in that subject. And this is some people would term it over-unity technology, others perhaps perpetual motion machines is another word people might use, or energy from the vacuum. And this is a possible untapped source of energy which is locked within the vacuum or within space itself, that many people believe can be turned into usable energy. So my opinion is, of the free energy, it's not energy from nowhere, it is coming from a source. But you've looked at certain technologies and you've even built some of your own experiments. So can you just tell us about your interest in that subject?
Yeah, I mean, I started off, like a lot of people, being interested in Bedini. And after looking at that for a while, I realised that was just the magnetic collapse, the inductive spike. There was no extra energy.
So you don't think there's any extra energy in the Bedini motor?
No, and I don't think Bedini's ever claimed there was.
Right, all right. Yeah. Have you seen any of the videos where they've got two batteries, one which is being charged and the other one is kicking the motor around?
Yeah.
And it seems to go for months or years, and it will charge the batteries as well. That's the claim. So it's getting energy from somewhere, allegedly. So you would refute that, yeah? Yeah,
well, these people need to go to battery university. Using batteries to try and make accurate measurements of power in and power out is just nonsense.
Yeah, I would agree that, yeah. So my thought on the Bedini motor has always been, why don't they just use capacitors?
Yeah, then you've got an exact storage.
For the input and output battery, instead they use capacitors instead. Why can't they redesign it with capacitors? Yeah. And then there would be no
room for error. No, a nice capacitor bank, that maybe still the same as the 12-volt car battery. And then, but the one thing I did find that did seem to work was there's a guy called Thane Hines, C. Hines, and he constructed coils in such a way that the rise time lags behind the rotational movement. So normally you get lens effect, and the magnetic field you induce opposes the rotation. Whereas if you can make the rise time lag by the rotation, it actually aids it, because once it's risen, the magnet's past the coil and it pushes it around. And I did my own replication of his coil and got this effect to happen. And I'm no physicist, so I could be wrong, but it seems to violate the work energy principle, because when you attach a load to a generator that's made with these coils, the rotor speeds up and the input current goes down.
Right.
Which violates the work energy principle. But some people may say it may just be impedance matching, but I don't know, because it seemed to work over a fairly wide range.
All right, and any other, because there are hundreds of alleged devices, aren't there?
If you can find some thorium, then you can try a nuclear battery, if you like.
Right.
And there's isotopic decay. It's not free energy, but it's extremely cheap, and there's no moving parts.
Right.
And you can have one of those in every home, and if people don't mind sitting on a potential nuclear explosion.
Right. So, and what would be the legal ramifications of building something like that? Do you know? Have you looked at that?
Funny you should ask that, because I watched a video the other day about a guy who was 15 in America, and he scraped off all the radium and the old glow-in-the-dark alarm clocks, and he got the stuff out of smoke detectors, which is radioactive, and some other stuff. And he ended up having the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, tearing down his shed and storing it in radioactive lead buckets or whatever. So I think it turns out there's no law that forbids individuals from experimenting with it, or there wasn't then, but there are for corporations. But I wouldn't even experiment with HHO gas, let alone nuclear power. So I'll stick to my magnets and coils, thanks.
Right. Right. And what's your feeling on where the energy is stored and how the mechanism is coming from the vacuum, as they say? Have you looked at the physics side of it?
Yeah, I mean, they do say, there are these virtual particles popping in and out of existence, and there is this, sea of negative energy. But I'm not a physicist. I'm not highly advanced in maths. So there's a lot of it I'd like to understand, but can't unless I invest, 6 months getting my maths better. But even that wouldn't be free, because that is coming from somewhere, and for all we know, that could be affecting something somewhere else. Yeah. We could be taking something from someone that lives somewhere else, for all we know. And if other dimensions exist, which there's no evidence of, you could be sucking something from another dimension, couldn't you? On a common sense level, magnets have a push, don't they? I mean, it looks like kinetic to us,
Yeah.
And I think the reason they don't work in a normal setup is because of the balance. They always cancel each other out. I think if you can find a clever way of introducing an imbalance to the magnets, like through new metal shielding or something, then you may be able to get rotation without any electrical input.
Yeah. So do you think this principle has been mastered and secretized, and they've got it in the secret space program or in other programs?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is I don't know. But if you look at, Tom Bearden often quotes like Khrushchev and the Russians talking about their scalar electromagnetic weapons, and we know that the computing power the NSA had in the 60s was huge. So we may be being trickle-fed technology as it gets developed, and then they've got safe control of it. They've built the machines or the weapons or whatever they want to build from it, and then we get the trickle-down effect and all the consumer devices.
Yeah. Now, one other thing that you've looked at, Gary, is images of Mars. So you've looked at Mars orbiters. I don't know if you've looked at lander images. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I believe they have landing probes there. I believe the rovers are on the surface of Mars. I haven't seen anything to make me think they're not. And unlike the lunar lander, the batteries in the rovers can withstand the environment they're in.
Yeah.
And
I've had a question answered on the batteries and how they're kept warm, because there's nuclear device powering them, or at least to keep the batteries warm. But I'm not 100% decided on what I said at the beginning there. I say 75% in the document that I've written, and it's the crinoid fossil. If they are on Mars, then there's a crinoid fossil there. But carry on.
Well, also, if they are on Mars, then there's an oil pipeline there. I found a thing. We should have got the photos, shouldn't we?
We can put them up afterwards.
Oh, excellent.
You can email, if you email me the photographs, I'll put them on as you're talking about them. So, an oil pipeline on Mars. Carry on.
Well, hopefully it's not an oil pipeline. I hope they're not there already. My God, BP. But so it's a huge. I only look at TIFF images, target image file format, because they're huge. You can zoom in. You can see loads of detail. I really don't like these people that say, "Oh, look, you can see a creature," and it's this blurry, fuzzy. There's too much of that. So I get these massive resolution files. I pour over every centimetre, and I zoomed into this thing, and it was a perfect cylinder. And you can see, because of the highlighting, that it is curved, and it is a cylinder, pipe shape, coming out. And then it has beveled edges on the end. It goes up into a sort of fan, into a Y shape, and out like that, with two holes, perfectly symmetrical through its vertical cross-section, perfectly symmetrical along its pipe cross-section. And I'm thinking, well, that's it's technology. Right. It's made by beings. And so I wrote to NASA, because I always do, because people often say, "Oh, this is this," and NASA lies. I always email NASA, not in my real name, obviously. Right. And NASA said, "Oh, it's a ventifact. It's a form formed by wind erosion." And I said, "What? A perfectly symmetrical through its horizontal and vertical cross-section ventifact?" So then I typed into Google, "Ask a geologist." Turns out you can ask a geologist anything at loads of universities. And I asked about 5 or 6 of them all around the world. And I got 2 answers. One was American, and which university was it? Because it made me think they might have known it was on Mars, or I don't know. Or maybe my email's on a list, don't answer this guy's questions. And he said, "Oh, well, it could be a ventifact, but we just don't know."
Right. So was this a Mars orbiter image?
No, this is a rover.
This is a rover image.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Interesting. Well, I'm not aware of the image you're talking about, but we can put that on the screen, and I'll certainly study it. I know that Andrew Johnson has pointed out various anomalies in the orbiter images. One that he thinks is some sort of dome within a crater that he thinks is, or suggests is man-made.
There's a few of them.
Or not natural.
Yeah. There's a huge golf ball dome in one of them. And there's one, I mean, the surface of Mars is incredible anyway. It's so alien looking, assuming these are real pictures of Mars, which I do.
I don't poo-poo the idea that maybe there are orbiters around Mars. I don't know if you watched my lecture on it, on the actual rovers.
I think I did. You and Andrew discussing them.
Yeah. It's there's certainly a lot of doubt in my mind over it. I'm not 100%. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
there's also the conference where the engineers have been asked questions and they don't know anything about the technology. That's what it comes across to me. But anyway, I guess I'm not going to put my life on it. And it's the same with the moon landings as well.
Yeah.
I'm not. We mentioned that earlier. You said that also some of the technology seems dubious and doubtful.
And some of the hazards, how could we have got past them?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Right. So you don't think that man walked on the moon?
no, I don't think man even got to the moon and orbited it.
Right.
Simply because of the radiation, the Van Allen belts.
Right.
And I don't think the film could have survived the intense radiation from the sun. No atmosphere to shield it, no magnetosphere to shield it. I don't think you could take photos on the moon with the Hasselblads they had then anyway.
So assuming that the Apollo was a hoax, it means that you can't really trust anything coming out of NASA, does it?
Well, the National Association of Space Actors.
So you are going on filtered information, even when you're talking about these.
Yeah.
We're going on what they've given us, aren't we?
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to poo-poo that there's a gas
Oh
pipeline
yeah, no, but
on
you're
Mars.
right. It's a weird situation because I'm saying, assuming that these are real, I think those objects are man-made. So it's kind of topsy-turvy.
All right, and Gary, it's been fascinating talking to you. And they have allowed you to start using computers again, and so you're working in the field of computers, and you're also self-employed, which is good news.
Yeah, good to be working again.
Now, the other thing that you're considering, or you've already embarked upon, is you're writing a book. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I've done about 4.5 chapters, and so it's about half finished. I should finish it by, I don't know, spring next year. But I did approach some major European publishers, but publishers have their own perception of the market, and they want me to write about, the darkness and the suicide and the despair, and it's really somewhere I don't want to revisit. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that writing about, the hacking.
You want to write a nerdy book?
I do. I want to write just what it was like to be, an average guy, and the typical nerd loves his sci-fi or her sci-fi and UFOs, and so I want to, like the nerd that went too far.
Yeah, all right. Well, as I always say, the nerd shall inherit the earth, I think. But yeah, it's been fascinating listening to you, Gary, and thanks for coming all the way to South Wales.
Thanks
and
for having me. It's been
good luck with the book, and good luck with the business.
Thank you.
And I hope they leave you alone from now on.
So do I, thank you.
All right, and remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.